Hello everybody, I'm the Gentleman Vandal. I break it down so you can build it back up, and I'm back with another Anime FX tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I made this shield used by Eosmon in the anime movie Digimon Adventure Last Evolution Kizuna. So, I'll quickly be going over the process I took to make it, and if you found an improvement in your version, feel free to let me know in the comments. Anyway, on to the video. To start off, we'll just delete everything here and press Shift A to create a circle mesh. Then change the number of vertices from 32 to 6, giving us a nice clean hexagon. Then go into edit mode and select all the vertices. Then press E and then S to extrude inward slightly, and then Alt left click on the inner hexagon to select the vertices and press F to fill in the hole. And that's us finished with the base shape of our shield. This first one will be for the aurora coloring that we'll see on the faces. So just pull up the timeline here and change it to the shader editor. And with our hexagon selected, we'll create a new material, and it will automatically assign itself to all the faces on our mesh. Next, we'll create an emission shader. So press Shift A, like we would for our mesh, and type it into our search, and connect it to our material output. Now do the same thing we just did, but this time for a transparent BSDF shader. But we have nowhere to plug it into, so what do? We do the same thing again, and make a mix shader, and drop that right onto the line connecting to the emission shader. Then connect the transparent BSDF into the other plug here. Now we have a way of controlling the transparency of the object, but you may notice that it isn't going invisible, just turning black. Easy fix. Go into the material properties on the side and change the blend mode from opaque to alpha blend, and the shadow mode from opaque to none. Now it's invisible, but for clarity's sake, we're just going to leave it at 1. Next, we're going to create a color ramp to plug into our emission shader, and to create the aurora coloring we want. Once again, press Shift A, click search, and type in color ramp. And to create the aurora coloring we want, click on the plus to add a third arrow on the ramp and position them as so: 0.0, 0.05, and 0.54. And for the colors, click on the arrow we want to add color to, and go into the hex tab on the color menu that comes up. Now, let's create a noise texture. For this, we want to keep the distortion at 0, the roughness at 0.5, the detail at 0, and the scale at 4. And plug that right into the color ramp. And if you have Node Wrangler enabled in the add-on settings, you can press Ctrl T to immediately attach a mapping and texture coordinate node to our noise texture. Now you're probably thinking that doesn't look like it fits the bill, and that's because we've only completed half of the pattern. For now, add a new mix shader to the emission shader. Now to get the second layer for the pattern we want, select the emission shader, color ramp, noise texture, and mapping node, and duplicate them to below where they normally are now. Now change the color ramp's colors to as followed. Connect the mapping node to the generated plug like the original, change the X and Y scales on the mapping node to -1, and connect the new emission shader into the mix shader. The outline is thankfully not as complicated. Select the outer faces of our hexagon, create a new material and assign it to them, and go back into the shader editor, and remember to name our material Outline. Like before, plug a mix shader into our material output, then an emission, and a transparent BSDF shader into the mix shader. Then create a color ramp, but unlike before, plug it into the faculties of our mix shader and bring the black of the ramp to the center. Next, plug a noise texture into the color ramp and change the scale to 20, the detail to 16, and both the roughness and distortion to 0. And finally, if you have Node Wrangler enabled, press Ctrl T to create a texture coordinate and mapping node. But instead of being plugged into generated, plug it into object. Select all the nodes in your material and press Ctrl G, and this will create a node group. Basically the equivalent of putting all your files in a folder. And with that, you have the materials you need. Select your hexagon and in the Modifiers tab, click on the Array modifier. But instead of 1, we want free. So click on the arrow on the modifier and just below apply, we want to hit duplicate, so do that twice. For the first array, we want a count of 10, and in the relative offset, we want a factor of 1 in the x factor. In the second array, we want a count of 2, and in the relative offset, we want 1 in the y factor. But this time, we want to check on the constant offset. This will allow how we arrange our hexagons to be a little more precise, so check that and go into it. For the y distance, give it negative 0.5 meters, and for the x distance, and I need you to listen carefully for this one, 0.866025 meters. And finally, for the third array, type a count of 6, and in the constant offset, give 3 meters to the y distance. One last note, make sure all the array modifiers have the merge option checked. This is so you don't press the L key to see if they're all joined and need to merge them one by one, otherwise you're going to be at it for a while. Now we're just going to apply all of our modifiers and carve out the shape we want with a knife tool. The reason why I'm not using a boolean modifier so I can change the size of the hexagon pattern whenever I want to is because I tried that. And as you'll see here, it didn't really work the way I wanted it to, leaving all these gaps that we don't want. So if you have a way to fix that, feel free to let me know in the comments and I'll think about making an update video to improve on it. So just quickly save it in case we make a mistake, and we'll just use the 6 hexagons to map out the shape that we want. Press K to activate the knife tool and click on the vertice on one end of our hexagons, and click on the one on the other side. Then press Enter to apply that cut. After making the shape we want, we'll delete the faces on the outside of the larger hexagon, and to just bring it to the center, we'll just press A to select everything, Shift and S to bring up this menu and click Selection to Cursor Offset, bringing the entire object to where the cursor is. Not Selection to Cursor, otherwise you're going to see all these loops and holes you jump through be clustered together into one teeny tiny dot. Now for the Disassembly Effect. To get the effect we want, we're going to select our hexagon, go into our Modifiers tab, and select a Vertex Weight Edit modifier. Then we'll go into edit mode and press A to select all of our vertices. Then, in our object data properties, we're going to press the little plus here to create a new vertex group. And with all of our vertices selected, we're going to assign all of them with a weight of 1. Back in our modifier, we're going to click on vertex group and select the group we just assigned our object to. Now check on the group add and the group remove here. You don't need to change them, just keep them the way they are on the screen. Next, go into fall off and change the curve type from linear to custom curve and reverse both ends of the curve. Now we're going to create a new texture and just press on the button on the end to immediately take us to the texture menu. We want to change the type from an image or movie to a blend with a spherical progression. Now in the colors tab here, we want to lower the brightness slightly by about 3 clicks. Then check on our color ramp and lower the white to the beginning. And like that, we have the texture we want. Next, press Shift A to create an empty. Any one will do. But I recommend using a sphere to make tracking the effect a little easier. And to keep nice and tidy, we're going to name our empty to be Hex Face Controller. Just make sure this empty is in the dead center of our shape, and then in texture coordinates of our modifier, change it to an object and assign our controller to it. One last modifier we need to add is our mask modifier, so go into the modifiers tab and just select it. Then, assign our vertex group to it and just make sure the threshold is at 0. Now whenever we scale up our controller, the faces of our hexagon will now disappear and reappear upon contact. And if you want to do so in reverse, simply click on this button here to reverse the vertex group. And to make sure the scale doesn't become a problem, we're going to add an object restraint to our controller. So click on the Objects Restraint tab, and click on Limit Scale, check everything, including the effect transform, and change the owner's space from world space to local space. Now for the minimum scale, change it to 0.2, and for the maximum scale, change it to 8. And to make sure the controller matches the shape, click on the controller and then the hexagon and press Ctrl P to parent it. Then, to control the position, we'll create a new empty, naming it our shield position, and parent our hexagon to it. And there you go. A nice and easy to animate shield that can disappear and reappear at will. I'm the Gentleman Vandal. I broke it down so you could put it back together. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Have a happy new year, and so long 2020. Goodbye everybody.